Today's sermon is titled The Servant's Assistant. We go to Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. It says, After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the Israelites. God had taken on Joshua as the new leader of the people of Israel. He was a different sort of leader for the people of Israel. Where Moses had been best qualified for standing up to Pharaoh and the Egyptians, Joshua was best qualified for standing up to the Canaanites. In this we see the man and the need must correspond. When God calls you to a task, He will give you the success that He has called you to. Because He has chosen you for a specific reason, because He believes you match the task that you are called to. One of the things through the transition of leadership and authority from Moses to Joshua, one of the last words that Moses says to Joshua, he tells him to be strong and courageous. Moses tells Joshua, be strong and courageous. And then throughout the first chapter of Joshua, we see the Lord speaking to Joshua. He tells him, no one shall be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Joshua is given this courage and given this promise from God to have courage, to know that just as God had spoken with and led Moses, God would speak with and lead Joshua in the mission that God had put him on. And he continues and he says 3 times the words that Moses had said to Joshua. We see, be strong and courageous, for you shall put this people in possession of the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to act in accordance with all the law that my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go. And again in verse 9, I hereby command you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. 3 times the Lord tells Joshua, be strong and courageous, re-uttering the words that Moses had spoken to Joshua before his death. And we later see the people of Israel speak to Joshua as well. The change in leadership required a strong leader. The people had, as much as they complained about Moses and complained about God, they were used to how Moses led them. And when Moses died, this new change, this new thing, and having Joshua now lead them, while they were used to Joshua leading them in battle, they were not used to their primary purpose as a people, and the primary purpose of the leader of the people of Israel being that of a general for battle. And as much as God was giving them the land that had been promised them, the land of Canaan, there was work to be done to accept it, to receive it, to possess it. Joshua commanded the officers of the people, and he said, let's skip the slide, there we go. Pass through the camp, command the people, prepare your provisions, for in 3 days you're to cross over the Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God gives you to possess. This is part of the difference between the first generation that had come out of Egypt and this second generation that was going to take and possess the promised land. The first generation saw the work that God was calling them to and said, even with God's help, we can't get it done. And the second generation saw what they were called to go and do and said, God is able to get this done. We just need to participate where God calls us to participate. The promised land was both a gift and a task. It needed to be taken over. They had to put in some effort. They had to put in some work in order to take it. And we often equate the promised land to salvation, and I believe rightly so. And sometimes we think that, oh, well, we can't be saying that the Israelites had to work to receive the promised land when we're saying we don't have to work to receive salvation. But the thing is that salvation is a gift, and grace through which salvation is given to us is allergic to merit. Is allergic to merit. Grace does not come on someone who deserves what they are receiving. Grace comes on those who do not deserve what they receive. But it doesn't mean that there is not effort involved in putting the thing together for its fulfillment and its full enjoyment. Back in Christmas of 2021, someone from my family, and I praise God I don't know who, because I don't know who to hold a grudge against for this. Someone gave my daughter Kaylee a gift. It was a very neat gift. Very neat gift. It was this wooden machine where you turn a crank, and the crank is hooked up to some gears, and the gears operate an arm that raises up and lowers an elevator, kind of on the end of a crane type lift, or the end of the arm, and it'll pick up these steel ball bearings and lift them up and run into a track and into a hole in one of the gears, and it takes that up to the top, and then it will, gravity fed, run through the rest of the track just to cycle back down to the bottom. Very cool thing. Very cool thing. Other than the handle of the crank and the ball bearings themselves, the entire thing is made out of wood. And there's always, you have to punch it out of this sheet of wood. It comes in a box with all these sheets of wood, but you have to punch it out of those. And then you have to sand all of the joints to make sure that everything's going to fit together just right, and press things together. And sometimes you have to sand things down because the piece that inserts up through and holds one piece into another is too long. So you put it together and then you sand it down so that it's not going to block the path of the ball bearing as it goes through, and all of this. And Kaylee brought that to me, and she said, "Dad, would you put this together for me?" 6 hours later, it was done. I recently came across the instructions for that gift, and I looked, and right there on the front of the instructions, and I'm sure it was on the front of the box as well, it says, "For ages 13 plus." She was 5. I do think highly of my daughter. It was something worth it. The joy, it's a fun thing. It's cool to watch it go around and see what it did. But I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure I enjoy that thing more than my daughter does because of the work that I put into it. But here's the other thing. That gift was given, but in order for it to be enjoyed, work had to be put in. There had to be something to do. There was participation involved. It was not enough just to buy the thing and have it sent to us. And for Kaylee to unwrap the present and all of that, that was not enough for the gift to be enjoyed. It had to be built. There was a lot of work for the Israelites to do to ultimately fulfill what God was calling the people of Israel to fulfill. They would need to change their lives. This was not only a time of conquest, but this time of conquest was to begin a time of transition where they were no longer going to be a nomadic people, but they would be a people settled in a land. And this generation that was coming in to possess the land of Canaan had known little else except for nomadic living. There may have been some who were older of the generation who perhaps were in their young childhood as the people of Israel were leaving exiting out of Egypt. They may have remembered some small snippets of life in the land of Goshen. But those memories would be fleeting compared to a lifetime of experience living in tents, moving from place to place as the Lord had led them to do. They were now moving into a conquering and settling phase. And one of the things we see here is that it was not enough for just one tribe to conquer and settle, but all of them needed to conquer and settle. Verses 12 and 13 of Joshua 1, he says, "To the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land." These tribes were to inherit the land on the eastern side of the Jordan River where the people were standing at the time. But he says, remember the word, you will receive this. This is your place. But he continues on. He says, your wives, your little ones, your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. This is referring from the side of the promised land. They were beyond the Jordan. He says, but all the warriors among you shall cross over armed before your kindred and shall help them until the Lord gives rest to your kindred as well as to you. And they too take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to your own land and take possession of it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan to the east. They were not to take their rest until all of the tribes of Israel could take their rest. This is a mirroring that we as a church are to work out our salvation, but it's not just an individual thing, it is a corporate thing. In Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says that we are to work together, that the Spirit is given to give gifts for the building up of the church until all its members come and grow into the full stature of the character of Jesus Christ. We cannot leave our own behind. We need to labor on behalf of others as well as cooperating in what God has called us for ourselves. The willingness of the people was apparent. He continues on. He says, they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. That doesn't necessarily sound good. But remember, that was their parents' generation that was grumbling and complaining more than this one. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your orders and disobeys your words, whatever you command shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. 5 times in the transfer of leadership, Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses, the servant of the Lord, was told to be strong and courageous. That would regard in standing up to the people, leading the people in what they were to do. It would regard in following God's commands in how they were to take and possess the land that was before them. You look through the book of Joshua and you see the successes that they had in battle. All of the successes they had in battle were at the hands of God. He gave them exactly what to do. He gave them the instructions. And so long as they followed the instructions he gave them, so long as they followed through, there were no problems. Of course, we know not everyone followed the instructions. They were human after all. And so there were problems, there were issues that came about. But one of the beautiful things in this is Joshua's leadership of the people of Israel is not that he was just leading them in a physical battle, in physical warfare against those who were living in the land that God had said, go and take it. But this is evidenced also as a spiritual battle. That because Achan had decided to keep some of the things of Jericho that God had said were devoted to him for destruction, because he had kept them, a couple thousand men went and died at the city of Ai in their first attempt to take it. And after the problem was found, after the problem was rectified, was remedied, they followed the Lord's instructions on how to take the city, and it fell easily. In Joshua chapter 24, verse 29, see it written here, after these things, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died being 110 years old. Joshua, who had been described as the assistant of Moses, the servant of the Lord, as he was taking on a point of leadership, is now at the time of his death described the same way Moses was described at the time of his death. The servant of the Lord. Joshua being called the servant of the Lord shows that he had really, when you read through the books of the law, you read through the books of Moses and find Joshua and where he is mentioned and how he interacts with Moses, how he interacts with the Lord, that he had been discipled by Moses to follow God in the different task that God had called Joshua to. Joshua learned to commune with the Lord, to spend time with the Lord. Where Moses would go into the tent of meeting and Joshua would go into the tent of meeting with the Lord with him. And after Moses received the message from the Lord, he would go out and tell the people. But the Bible tells us that Joshua remained in the tent of meeting with the Lord. God is calling us to do great things. God is calling us to do incredible things. But we have to spend the time with Him to know what we're being called to and what His means of fulfilling the mission are. All throughout this time of trouble in Canaan before the establishment of the ultimate power of the people of Israel, whenever the people are going against a city or going against a group of kings who gather together and say, we're going to take them on. Throughout the time of the book of the Judges, does Israel's army ever outnumber the army of their oppressors? No, not once. The closest we get is in Gideon, and leading 30,000 men who had volunteered to go and free the people. And the Lord said, hold up, you have too many. If you bring this many people, you and all of your people are going to think that you did this, but I need you to know that I did this. So we're going to winnow this down. And so he begins a process of winnowing, and he goes from 30,000 ultimately down to 300. 1% of who he had started with. And everyone who participated in that battle, everyone who heard about the results of that battle, which can hardly be called a battle from the Israelite side of things, knew exactly who had given them the victory, and it was the Lord, because they went according to His methods. They went according to His means of working for the end of the mission. There's an interesting thing we see here at the time of Joshua's death. When Moses died, the servant of the Lord then speaks to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. When Joshua, the son of Nun, died, the servant of the Lord does not turn and speak to Joshua's assistant. There was not another solo individual who was discipled by Joshua to lead the people. And those Israelite monarchists might say that, well, that was a problem, that was a failing on Joshua. Was it a failing on Joshua? I don't think so. Because who was it who had picked Joshua to be a disciple of Moses? Did Moses pick Joshua? No, the Lord had picked Joshua. And Moses heard and understood. And he knew what the Lord was calling Joshua to do, so he discipled him as a leader. But after this point, God had said, okay, we've gotten through the troubling time of going through the wilderness. We've gotten through the troubling time of the conquest and the conquering of the land of Canaan. Now it is time for the officials, the judges, the various leaders, the priests of the family to relate to me and be with me as I intended back at the mountain of Sinai. So remember, at the end of Exodus chapter 20, the Lord speaks the 10 Commandments to all the people. And then they were to go up the mountain, and they come to the foot of the mountain, and Moses is there, and Joshua is there, Aaron is there, and they say to Moses, "We can't handle that. That terrified us. You go talk to God and you tell us what he said." And there's an interesting thing that we see in this, that as we go from a single leader in Moses to the single leader in Joshua, to then each tribe would have their own leader. Each clan in each tribe would have their own leader. Each family in each clan in each tribe would have their own leader. It only takes a couple of generations, and the discipleship of keeping people in connection with God is gone. And I know it's gone because it only takes a couple of generations after the death of Joshua for the people to turn away from God. And then begins the oppression and occupation of the land by other peoples, foreign peoples, and God must then raise up judges and raise up deliverers to free the people when they will turn back to him and realize their mistake, realize their error. We have to be intentional about training and raising the next people. There was not a single disciple of Joshua's, but I do believe that there were many. Because Joshua did not speak to all the people directly, but he spoke to them through the officers of the people. He spoke to them, he delegated to them through these others who were leaders in their tribes and clans and families. He spoke to them in ways that they would be able to understand that there is still levels of authority, there is still levels of relation to God, even when the single solitary individual is no longer the one in charge. God calls us as priests, not just pastors, elders, deacons. Every believer, everyone who belongs to the body of Christ is a priest to all the world. We have been given a task, not an easy one. A task to bring others to understand who Jesus is more and more. Now, this week there's been a whole lot of talk about a certain performance at the Grammys. And there have been all kinds of different Christians calling it out, saying, "What a despicable thing! What a horrible thing to put before everyone else." And for those who react that way, I only have one question. Did you really expect anything different from a song called Unholy? But let's look at it a little bit differently here as well. And I haven't watched the performance, and I don't care to. But unholy is a biblical term. Unholy is a biblical word, a biblical concept. and what happened in that performance and what went on with it and why so many people are all up in arms about this performance, what it showed was the reality of unholiness. And I'm not saying it's good, but let's recognize what is. And if we revolt at that reality of unholiness, let's take that a little bit as a good sign that we don't want unholiness. Let's take it as a good sign to realize that perhaps our cultural expressions of things are not specifically designed with holiness in mind. Or even with all of truth in mind. We are called to something difficult. We are called to stand against not just powers of physical prowess, but spiritual powers as well. The great controversy is becoming ever more apparent if our eyes are open. And there will likely come a day where people of God will look and they want one leader. They want one person who can take the responsibility and the authority and go and do the thing that they want them to do. But that is not what God has called us to. We are all His royal priesthood. We are all His special people. All who will come to Him and follow Him to the depths that He calls them to. We must listen to the word ourselves. We must commune with the Lord ourselves. Otherwise, we will end up falling to the powers around us that wish to devour us. We have been given a mighty task, but we have a God mightier than the task. We are in a spiritual war, but we have the greatest strength of that war when we follow and we remain in Jesus Christ. We cannot be defeated. When we do what He calls us to do, we cannot be defeated. He tells us, go, make disciples, baptize, and teach. And when we do those things, His kingdom wins.